So let's talk about another synastry contact with the moon, being the moon conjunct someone else's Mars. This is a very hot-blooded kind of contact where love and passion and hate, love and hate, they're all mixed together because it's a very emotionally sexy but volatile experience when these two connect in any aspect. With the conjunction, there tends to be a more agreement and a more effortless combination of the energy of Moon and Mars. But Moon and Mars are actually very different operating systems, right, within us, and they're very personal points. So they're personal planets, and Moon Mars will activate and trigger each other immensely, like all the time, with all the little things, exactly because they're personal planets combining together. So anytime you have a personal planet touching the other, it's going to be more evident the activation of this contact in a constant daily basis, as in a contact with a personal planet versus a transpersonal planet will be a theme of more like longevity and long-term distant effects. So Moon Mars, well, there's an obvious, very raw attraction that is formed between these two when they get to interact. When they sense each other and read each other around the room, they can pick on each other like a scent. It's very primitive and very raw and very sensual, like each other's presence, just the presence, the way they come across when they get to know each other. It feels instinctively different and something that the Mars person wants to chase. So independently of Mars here being the woman or the man, it tends to push in the Mars this impatience, this aggressive pursuer, chaser side towards the moon. Because the moon is a more passive, laid back, shy, or introverted energy. And feminine, it tends to work more in a feminine response. Again, independently of the moon here being the man or the woman. We're talking about the psychological instinct that it's activated. So the moon is more laid back, passive, and feminine, and the Mars is the more aggressive, passionate, impatient side. So usually, the Mars person will want to direct its course of action towards the moon. It will want to take action quite shortly into noticing the moon. When they don't, it has to be like other contacts here, creating a little bit of a stalling effect or a repression like a Saturn involved, because Moon Mars aspects are very instinctual, fast, in the moment, and when they get to the talking stage, he gets very quickly to be into hooking up or going into the bedroom. It's a very quick evolving interaction. They don't want to spend a lot of time waiting to be intimate. They feel hot around each other. They feel like they need each other. They feel like mating with each other. So the instinct here is to be intimate. And the moon person enjoys the very passionate, brave, bold, even aggressive side that can tend to come out of the Mars, or more assertive. They like how assertive, at least initially, the Mars is, especially in terms of showing them their interest towards being with them. The problem is that Mars is moved by conquest, sex, desire, passion, competitive urges. And the moon is soft and deep and emotional. So what ends up happening is that they hook up, or they get to be intimate, or they get to have an interaction feels very excitable, and they go kind of quickly into lovemaking, and then the moon gets upset, or the moon gets a little bit annoyed or regretful, even in terms of understanding that maybe the Mars person is not as deeply emotionally invested or deeply emotionally expressive towards this relationship, or considerate of his or her emotions. Mars is an aspect of our energy that it's a taker. Usually, initially, there's actually a sense of Mars just wanting to take the moon, because they feel like the moon is so emotionally tempting and drawing into them this sensation of wanting to have the moon for themselves. But it's about taking something from the moon, their energy, their emotion, their sensuality, right? They're not thinking about, oh, I love the moon, or I love how this person, I love who this person is, for example, because they don't take long enough or time enough to actually get to know the moon person. They just want to, have that passionate experience most of the time. They want to feel the rush of having, of actualizing their desires to have the moon. And so after they get to have the moment of where they execute here a desire, it usually happens very fast into the connection, so they don't really know that each other well enough. They act by impulse. Then they start to see the differences. The moon start to feel the differences, like that Mars person is selfish, or Mars person is inconsiderate, or Mars person is just sexually driven. It's all about sex, or all about whatever, whims and desires of the moment Mars has. So the moon person starts to feel a little unsafe, and a little triggered, and a little emotionally I don't want to say abused, but again, taken advantage of. Sometimes it happens with this contact in particular. More so towards the square or the opposition is going to be even more evident, but it can happen here as well with the conjunction. Is in a sense that they sense that they're being taken advantage of, because the moon person does really emotionally open up to Mars way faster than what they should. Usually they get flustered and charmed by the energy of Mars that feels so sexy, so bold, and so activating as well for them, that they themselves don't know why they're doing what they're doing, but they do it. So the moon person can be again shy, or more careful, or more have more of a method to how they date, but then they meet this Mars person and something happens out of the plan, and they just move by each other's around each other by impulse. And Mars usually is okay with that, but moon tends not to be. So another thing that tends to happen in this contact is a lot of passion, and a lot of jealousy, and a lot of immaturity, and a lot of annoyance reactions, and a lot of annoyance around each other's reactions, coming from a lot of emotional immaturity. Because another thing is that Mars, Moon are both, or they tend to be both, what they have in common is a degree of immaturity. So imagine, it's like that classic scene of you having two little kids with small age difference. They're still, both of them are babies, and one takes the toy out of the other, and the other starts pushing back, and the other starts crying a lot. So take that as an example as how emotionally they tend to operate with each other. They have responses through this connection that are a little bit emotionally immature and emotionally exaggerated. But the moon feels really sensitive around Mars. And Mars' small, actions that feel blunt, aggressive, inconsiderate, selfish will bring about this huge emotional toll to the moon. So Mars can feel like they're not doing anything wrong, they're just being themselves, but that's going to affect the moon somehow. So the problem with this contact is how well you respond to being constantly triggered, or how more of a thicker skin you grow. Because with this contact, the point is to make the moon a bit more, make the moon a bit more aggressive in terms of pushing back and being more independent and assertive and strong on the moon's feet. And for the Mars is for them to become a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more considerate. That's why in the conjunction there's always a transfer of energy. So Mars brings courage, Mars brings assertiveness, Mars brings sexiness and confidence to the moon. It helps support the moon in those elements. And the moon helps Mars become a little bit more heart-centered, a little bit calmer, a little bit more considerate of other people's feelings. And it helps them understand that their actions, they can't just do whatever they want, because that can make other people suffer or bring consequences to the other people, right? So there's this transferring of energy that it's very interesting because they are very different. So Mars is actually an energy as well that it's very protective. In its highest vibration, it can be extremely protective, like a hero, warrior energy. And so the protective instinct around the moon is also very high. So they can become very territorial as well around the moon person. So any sign of danger or they take on themselves the role to protect moon, and they feel a little bit tense and a little bit like they're not doing what they're supposed to do when the moon is out there in the world without them. There's this weird psychological energy that they develop, as in one needing the other, one needing to rescue the other, one needing to watch the other, one needing to protect the other. The good side of this is that when they combine their energies well, they're very protective around each other, but especially Mars, they take on this role of being very, very protective and territorial, and that can also be very sexy, but also bring a lot of issues around jealousy. They're very jealous of each other, very jealous. And again, unconsciously, they like to kind of make up the scenarios to have a problem, right? Or to have like a jealousy trigger, because then they will make up through sex, which is where they meet really well. And they're going to have like make-up sex that it's mind-blowing. So they tend to also be in these cycles of fighting and then making up, fighting and then making up, because it's what leads them to the experiences in the bedroom that are the most heated and passionate. Even though I would argue they don't really need that, because the energy is already combined. So you have the hot planet, red planet of war and sex and aggression, and a very masculine infused energy with the most feminine sensitive side. So the potency when these two are combined to bring about this passionate energy and encounter is already there. But they tend to act out or play out in scenarios that are immature, to just trigger the other and then have this experience. Especially if they feel like there's a moment in the relationship where the passion or the sex might be low or might not be as it used to be, they're going to create this little traps in their way to make sure that the fire is ignited. They love, they meet at a very fired up space. So they love when things are heated. And heat means positive expression through passion, being in sexuality, or being when they're passionately doing something together, right? Like when they're active out there in the world, doing things that bring them joy and energy, or also, unfortunately, when they're fighting. So, or when they're in conflict, or when they're in battle. And many times, because also the moon represents domestic sphere, a lot of things start happen when they live together, or when they start a family together, or when they're in a more intimate, structured life together, where they start having more and more fights. So actually the living together with this contact is not very easy, just because Mars is a planet that is not very tempered and controlled, and it tends to go to actions and reactions of violence and aggressiveness. So imagine, in the negative expression, it can cause domestic violence cases. It can cause Mars to be physically aggressive towards the moon, and the moon is a more, defenseless, vulnerable space. Or just a lot of arguments and fighting in the home, or a lot of arguments and fight because of other women in particular, or because of other men, because there's a sense of jealousy around each other. Mars is very, 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 very triggered by jealousy around competition, right? It's the competitive element, like, oh, you're giving more attention to this person, or you're complimenting more this other man, right? It's going to activate the masculinity, the toxic, perhaps, masculinity in that Mars. So we want to look at how the Mars person in particular is aspected natally, to see if they already have an inkling to not deal well with pressure of emotions. Like if it's a Mars that is already like escalated into aspects of conflict on their own, then the moon contact there is going to probably bring that even more to the surface, because the emotion is going to be like the fuel to get that going. And if also you want to look to the moon to see how the moon tends to respond. Will she fight back? Is she a more enduring moon? Will she place proper boundaries, or will she submit or subjugate herself or himself as well to situations that can be potentially abusive or dangerous for her or his own well-being? So the moon will tell you how the moon tends to respond to Mars situations. Because if there's cases of where the moon witnessed violence or witnessed couples fighting and thinks that's normal, then it's going to repeat that. It's going to repeat that a lot in their own story. And so maybe also a lot of times the moon is attracting aspects that will mirror familiar scenarios. So the classic, maybe this person that is the moon saw parents fighting a lot, or saw mom being abused, or saw dad as well being abused. So whatever they saw, and they took it as normal in relationships, or a lot of jealousy problems, or any other problems dealing with Mars things, then if they witness that and they grow to see relationships that way, and worse, even find men or women attractive only when they exhibit these traits, then it's going to be like played out into the relationship. So again, you always want to see the individual chart as well to see how that will affect. But you know, Mars can also be an energy that's just going to be they're going to be very explosive, very hot to handle around. And the moon is going to be like, how do I respond to that? It's very intense for the moon to sustain the same frequency of intensity that the Mars expects, just because the moon is softer and it goes through phases in the cycle, right? So there will be times that the moon responds well to the intensity and matches the intensity, and there's going to be times where I just want to be quiet. And Mars is loud. Again, is that the example I said, like having that annoying sibling, you know, in our ear, and we just want them to shut up. And then we tell them to shut up and they get upset with us. So it's a bit of those type of dynamics that can happen here, where the moon will have different moments and phases within her own self and their ability to emotionally process this very intense person. And Mars might not understand or respond well, because Mars is an energy that doesn't go deep into the moon inner, you know, processing. It stays on what needs to be done kind of energy, action all the time. So it can feel like the moon does not have like room to breathe at times. This goes even about the sexual aspect, like the Mars can be very intense and hungry for the moon all the time and wants sex all the time. And maybe sometimes the moon needs to recharge, or maybe the moon is just not in the mood for sex. That will be offensive, or a little bit, you know, offensive to Mars pride and ego. And it will make them feel upset, because they're going to take it as the moon, it doesn't desire me anymore. Or worse, the moon is interested in someone else. You see, like the Mars perceptions are so raw that they don't go into the subjective realm like moon. They don't go about, oh, maybe she's not in the mood or he's not in the mood because this or that or that. They don't take in account. It takes a while, at least, for them to take in account that maybe there's something else that's not about them going on that's making, you know, the moon's person sex drive, for example, fluctuate or not be so up for it all the time, right? So this is a scenario that can happen. Another scenario is if the moon starts to be that way, like if it starts to be like this constant theme of the moon, you know, being moody and not wanting to give to Mars, kind of what the moon knows Mars wants, to be happy, because that can happen as well. This very mature power play here. The Mars person then will go out and cheat or have sex with someone else and start playing around. And then that will create a huge problem, of course, with the moon and hurt moon's feelings. And then they're going to go into that cycle of fighting, and then making up potentially again in the bedroom, or even worse, Mars making the moon feel that it was her or his fault because they didn't give to them either the sex, the attention, or whatever it is that they were looking for. Remember, Mars is a very selfish planet. It's not operating in selfless anything. So Mars contacts can be very hot and very spicy and very attractive, yes, and very encouraging and motivating. But they also have another side. Despite the more aggressive problems, conflict problems, is also a very selfish nature, where Mars contacts are the contacts that cheat the most, and they don't care about it. They're just doing it in a more instinctual, like physical level. So you can't really make sense of the reasons. They go about it by impulse. They go about it by pure physical need. So, and that for the moon can be very hard to grasp. As I said, they are different, very different parts of our system. So the moon goes deep. The moon can fathom the idea of being sexually intimate with someone else just because of a physical need. That even seems like dumb, right? To the moon, because the moon is deep. It has access to a world that Mars doesn't have any footing in. So you can't expect, at least easily, for the Mars to grasp the depths of the moon, and the moon can't make the Mars be out of emotional manipulation, which can happen, or emotional control, or emotional drama, what they want the Mars to be. Mars is very driven by their own beat. So yes, they can love you, but they will love you in their own terms, and they will make feel like their love is a bit selfish. And they will love you in their own way, which means that it's not a love that it's expressed in the same way the moon loves. That's the thing. The Mars will show love through persistence, passion, sex, protection, and providing. Actually, this is a contact that can bring about the classic protect and provide vibe in a relationship, where the Mars role will take with them, with pride as well, having this partnership to take care of. Especially if the Mars person is a man or is in more of the masculine dominant, psychological function, they will love to take on this role. They will feel pride around being able to protect and provide the moon. But it tends to be, this aspect is a bit like the patriarchal dominant, or wanting to be more on the patriarchal dominant side of things. So if you are in a relationship where you are the Mars and you are a woman, for example, what can happen is whatever ideas you yourself hold of men that make you angry, it's going to be showed in this relationship. So it's like, if you are a woman and maybe you're a very feminine person, still the Mars shows how we get angry, how we get turned on, and how we see men. What makes men attractive, the qualities, and what makes men repulsive. And so if you are a Mars woman attracting a moon man in a conjunction, you're going to feel that this man activates your Mars. So it activates your drive, both your sex drive and your energy drive, but it's a man that can potentially make you angry. And it can make you feel like this man can be a projection of everything you either despise in the patriarchy, you are angry about in the patriarchy, or it can turn out to be a great example of a man that's healthy, that provides and protects you. It depends. So again, if you are a woman with the Mars side, this is how it tends to express. And usually you're going to be the one more aggravated in the relationship, being the woman, where you're going to be more the one more geared towards being impulsive, or being more angry easily, or pushing, right? Being more on the pushy side of the relationship, or the dominant. It could be a woman that is more dominant in the relationship as well. But it is a very passionate aspect. It's very instinctual, as I said. They're very like sexual primal urges come through with this too. They usually want to make babies or have children, or there's thoughts around there's thoughts around getting here, getting something out of each other that feels like a big win. So Mars can feel very turned on by the idea of either making the moon person pregnant, or the moon person by directing the Mars person to be someone they fantasize about. Like if they have a fantasy about that Mars person being their hero or being a parent or being this or being that, like they can really like have a great, emotional aspiration or desire to direct Mars to fulfill their desires. And usually this is where they meet well, is in the fulfillment of deep, raw desires. But it's desires that are very raw. Again, if you ask this contact to be more romantic, more, careful, more sensitive and polished, is not the contact. It's the opposite. This is a contact about what you really want out of me. Say it, show me, right? Don't just talk about it. Like Mars doesn't have patience to be in a situation for too long where it's just about emotional exploration or indulging in fantasies. They want action. So they want things to happen. When they don't have it happen, if there's something standing in the way, or if the moon is making too many problems about having things happen, they can drop the relationship. They can go elsewhere. They can really drop it, because Mars gets angry and Mars doesn't have the patience to sustain the long-term gain. Like Saturn influence will go all the way down. They won't mind waiting for sex or waiting for commitment or waiting for something. They like to wait and earn it. Mars, not so much. So Mars, that's why Mars is associated with selfishness, because they don't want to earn it. They just want it. They feel entitled of having it. So I hope the interpretation of this aspect was helpful. Hopefully we'll see each other soon.